Hi, welcome to Simple Shifts Conversations on Food, Life, Weight, and Mindset. I'm Martha McKinnon, and this is my partner and brother, Peter Morrison, and we're so happy to be here with you today. Hello, hello.
Hi, everyone.
So, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. I'm happy to be here. We're continuing our conversations around mindless eating, the book by Brian Wansink, which I really credit for providing me with the insight that helped me to get to where I am today. It's been a journey of decades, but reading Mindless Eating and implementing all of the lessons in it and the suggestions really was a turning point for me. And I think I've tried to look back on it now because it's unbelievable. But I've read the book and started following its suggestions way back in 2010. So it's been 15 years and it doesn't seem possible.
Mm.
So I've sort of been looking back and reflecting to say, what was it? What was it that made that book so powerful for me? Because I think many people will read it maybe and not have the same light bulbs, but it really just caused a light bulb shift in me. It changed just the way I saw myself. It helped me understand that I think for a long time I was just mad and frustrated and I felt broken and overwhelmed. And just reading that book, it made me laugh and it made me, I guess it just helped me to see that it was a human problem and not a Martha problem. And there was just something so it just I could breathe and it seemed so easy compared to just trying to manage myself. What he often says in the book is it's much easier to manage your environment than it is to manage your mind, and I think that's so true. And so these steps seem so sometimes unbelievable that they would even work, but so easy and why not? Why not try? And it was magical. And I hope that by sharing these details and revisiting the book, that some other people will have the same happy experience that I did.
Right. So today we're going to take a look at chapters 5 and 6.
Okay. And so chapters 5 and 6 really sort of, and I've got some notes here. They really talk about eating patterns and the power of habits, our deeply ingrained habits, and just how so much of what we do in life can just be done on automatic pilot. We don't even think about it. It's just unconscious. And there's that term in neuroscience. They talk about neurons that fire together, wire together, and the fact that when you engage in these behaviors over and over and over again, suddenly they're hard, to overcome, but they can be overcome. That's the cool part. So in the book, Brian Wansink talks about a friend or a colleague who had this situation around Slurpees in the 7-Eleven, and he had just this habit it became like this everyday habit. When he drove by the 7-Eleven, it was just like the car just seemed to be pulled into the 7-Eleven for the Slurpee. And every time he saw a 7-Eleven, there was this deep connection between 7-Eleven Slurpee. And that can be true. There's lots of examples of that. Can you think of any habits that were ingrained in you growing up or um like a deeply ingrained pattern or an
I
eating?
had, like, growing up, I'd say through high school, I had
Mm-hmm.
kind of a similar with fast food kind of
Mm-hmm.
drive through. The whole drive through is
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I forget when it became a
Yeah.
thing, but all of a sudden it um it became dangerous. Like you could just go get fries or a ice cream cone or at McDonald's or an apple pie. It didn't even have to be like a meal, but it was so you didn't even have to get out of your car. I mean, how cool is that?
Well, and I'm reading that on some college campuses now they have robots that are you can actually there's an app and you can go and put in your order and the robot's going to go and get the food at the cafeteria and bring it back to your dorm. I mean, talk about like dangerous convenience. So I think what you're saying is
Wow.
true, right? There used to be this delay between thinking about something, right, having a craving and being able to satisfy it. And fast food, microwaves, these frozen quick foods, and now like imagine like robots delivering your food. You don't even have to go out and walk across the campus to get it.
One of the things he talks about is barriers, right?
Right,
So the slurpy slushy thing,
right,
I understand it, but wow, you still have to drive there. You have to get out of your car. You have to get in the store. You have to pull out your wallet. A drive through or delivery that's a totally different ball game,
right.
for
And
convenience.
yeah, and this happened to be just on his route. So I
Right,
mean,
right,
so
right.
and that will happen like so every day. And I know I had the Starbucks habit for a
Mm-hmm.
few years back in the working days where it just became automatic to be pulling in to Starbucks to get the coffee and the sweet and not just the
Mm-hmm.
coffee, the pumpkin spice latte or the mocha. I mean, on the way to work, sometimes with a sweet treat, and it just became sort of automatic. Um, Monday through Friday because you're just driving by it and you pull in. And like you said, and now so many of these places have the drive-throughs. And so those can be patterns that get pretty quickly, right? Because they're satisfying. You're tapping into your pleasure, your reward centers. There's nothing like the taste of a nice hot French fry or
Mm-hmm.
that donut or muffin or, so many of these foods. So other habits, I mean, we had quite a few like food, I think, deeply ingrained food traditions, that,
Sunday night pizza. We would have our
yeah,
dinner. Mom would
yeah.
cook dinner
You're
Sunday
going to share some of our
afternoon.
family secrets that's why we have that's what but this is what this is all about because people are going to be able to relate, right? So yes, share the pizza story.
Would be sitting around dinner table, I don't know, 5 o'clock on a Sunday evening,
Yeah,
and we'd be discussing what we were gonna get on our pizza that, 2 hours later.
right.
And
And it was a shared and it happened like weekly,
mhm,
right? What are we going to have as they were eating our dinner as though so that we weren't hungry those 2 hours later. But we were going to enjoy this wonderful, delicious, great pizza place, pizza. Yeah.
mhm,
So that's
mhm,
one that was deeply ingrained. I know dad, I think about ice cream in the
mhm,
evenings was just very,
mhm.
very common. It's hard for me even now to go to the movies without popcorn. I mean, movie and popcorn for me they just go together.
Well, just the smell walking into the theater too,
Yeah,
it
right.
it's,
It's
intoxicating.
right. And so I have not tried to break that habit because and we don't go to it's easier like if you again and sometimes you have to consider does this work in your life and if you were going to the movies 2 or 3 times a week maybe not but I mean if we go to the movies maybe 2 or 3 times a year it's not really a problem, right? So that's the other thing we have to remember. It's what we do all the time, not what we do
Mhm,
occasionally that's going to be a problem. So you've got to consider that in your assessment of your situation too. So, yeah, so the habits. So you got to consider that and then think about ways that you can untangle these habits, right? Or so sometimes you can like the guy in the book with the 7-Eleven, he just started driving a different way home because he just started taking a different route and then he didn't see the 7-Eleven and then the problem was solved that way. I know of and remember reading, I think it was a story she probably shared in a Weight Watchers meeting of a woman who had that fast food driving past the fast food and not stopping was very, very difficult for her on the way home after a long day. And so she started putting her purse in her trunk. So if you're going to now drive through, you're going to have to get out of your car, you know, and get into your trunk and to get your money. And so that was how she broke herself of the habit. So taking a different route, again, this whole concept of making um, the habit that you're trying to break challenging, hard,
mhm,
create hurdles in it because it'll change your behavior. We are very lazy. And again, they talk about a lot of those examples in the book in terms of convenience and the fact that the more convenient something is, the more we're likely to do it. And they have these examples of like ice cream freezers, right, in the
mhm,
cafeteria, right near
mhm,
the checkout. And if the ice cream freezer had a door on it, then you were much less likely to reach in, open the door and reach in for the ice cream versus if it was just open and you didn't have to reach in. They did studies
Or
around almonds.
if it was positioned in a different line where you paid for your sandwich and drink, but then you had to go to a different line to get it
Right,
and pay again,
right.
you're less likely to actually,
Yeah. And I've done
hurt.
that with myself sometimes out. I mean, um, occasionally when we're traveling, we will go to Culver's, which I don't know if you do you have Culver's around where you are?
No.
But they're sort of a
Mm-mm.
burger. I mean, I guess they're Wisconsin based. There's a lot of them in the Midwest, and sometimes when we're traveling, they do good lunch, but they have this delicious. I mean, every day it's frozen custard, so it's frozen soft serve, but it's very, very rich and delicious. And I would often just say, well, I'll decide on that later, right? So you're going to have to get back in line. I'm not going to decide on my custard now. I'm going to eat my lunch and again, oftentimes because you've created that hurdle, I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to have to get in line. I'm going to have to wait. You're less likely to have the custard than if you just got it when you ordered your meal. So you just have to think about ways to make whatever habit you're trying to break less convenient, more of a hassle.
What about the idea of the longer we stay at the table, the more we eat? Like, what
Yeah,
if you're at a family gathering or I mean, like, okay, so holiday, it's a one-off, but
right.
say it's a dinner party or, you know, something you do more regularly with friends or,
Yeah, so there was study and there was research that says that the more people we're with, the longer it's sort of like it's analogous to being at the mall, right, or being at the grocery store. The longer you spend in the grocery store, they've shown the more money you're going to spend, the more things the longer you spend at the mall, the more you're going to spend. The more time you spend at the dining table, the more you're going to eat. And they've proven this. The more people you eat with, right, the more you're going to eat. So again, I think that knowing it then can help you. So what are some of the things you could do knowing this reality, knowing the longer you sit there, and again, it can be really fun, right? You're sitting around with friends or family, you're having good conversation, music, it's just a good time. What are some things that you could do to make sure that just being there longer didn't result in eating excess? I think the whole dish and dine thing is powerful, right? Like not having the food on the table. So if you
Mhm.
pre-plated the food and you were sitting at the table, even if you were done eating and you were still visiting, you wouldn't be just reaching in for just a little more the way you would if you were serving the meal family style. So that could be helpful. Another strategy would be and this is one that I've played with when I'm thinking about it, is to time yourself, like to try to be the last one to start eating.
Mm.
Um, so that again, you're delaying and slowing down the whole process. And so that can be helpful, just to try
If
to
if
time
you
it.
if you leave a little or you leave some food on your plate,
Yep.
others might be less likely to say, "Oh,
Have
have
a little
more."
more. Can I get you more? Yeah. So leave a little behind. And that's one thing that I continue to read on this topic in all kinds of different capacities. And so that's one good strategy to practice with just leaving a little bit behind. Don't be cleaning out your plate. And that can be helpful. Learning to just, and I think we're going to get back to just learning to tune in to yourself too, and to notice, to not go on automatic pilot and to just be checking in with, am I hungry? Am I no longer hungry? Because there are other cultures who have figured that out. The French are good at it. The Japanese, I'm not going to remember. The Okinawans have a saying. I'm going to butcher it if I try. So maybe you can just look it up and share it, Peter. But they have a reminder to say only be filling up to like 75% full. So they're constantly reminding themselves when they're eating so there's things you can be doing to remind yourself not to overeat. That could be helpful.
I like if you're in a restaurant environment, decide ahead of time either what you're gonna eat or I don't know if it's you or it's in the notes, but
Hmm.
to have a pick two rule
Yeah.
where you maybe have an appetizer and a cocktail or appetizer and dessert or any combination, but rather than
Right. That
everything.
was an interesting one as I thought about this, because that was another really powerful script in my mind, and I can't remember when it got pointed out, but the whole eating out thing. When we grew up, eating out was like very, especially to nicer restaurants, was very, very rare, right? It was an occasion. It was maybe a couple
Mhm.
times a year during summer, if dad was on vacation, there'd be a fancy meal. And so in my mind, the script around eating out was that it's a celebration and that you indulge, you have the appetizer and you have the dessert and and it's just this it's a again it's a
It's an
celebration.
event.
It's an
Yeah.
event.
Yeah.
And that script I took into later life when I was married and working. And suddenly now you're two married people working long days, commuting, and eating out became common. You know, we probably ate out at least 2 times a week, if not more,
Mm,
right? Maybe 2 times eating out, plus bringing Chinese food in, plus bringing pizza
mm,
in. I mean, there was a lot of that. And what I realized, and again, I think it probably may have been pointed out at a Weight Watchers meeting, is what's your mindset? What's your around eating out? And for me, I realized even though eating out had become just part of a regular routine, I still took that celebratory, it's an event thinking
mm,
into every time I ate out. It's like, it's just Tuesday and we're eating out because we haven't had a chance to grocery shop and it was a really long day. It's not a wedding. It's not a birthday, but I was still, yeah, have the appetizer,
mm,
have the dessert because I'm out to a restaurant.
mm,
And so that was a really great awareness that I had to say, it's time to change your thinking around eating out now because it's just a Tuesday night. It's not an event, you know? And so that was helpful for me. And again, thinking about it that way, just choose ahead. Like what will I have? Especially if it's a restaurant you're familiar with. Like what will my choice be tonight? And how can I make it just a meal and not like this big event? It's Tuesday. If I were home, I wouldn't be having dessert. So I'm not going to have dessert just because I'm in a restaurant, you know?
mhm.
So that
We
helps
had this
me.
one we had this one friend who we would take out to dinner occasionally. He was an older gentleman, and he always ordered 2 appetizers.
Hmm.
He never ordered an entree. He never ordered dessert. I don't Not that I can remember, but he
Hmm.
always and he was a slim,
Hmm.
healthy, and I don't think I ever asked him, but I never
Hmm.
really thought about it. It just sort of popped into my head, but I'm like, "Oh, how
Yeah.
interesting." He
So
was ahead of the
right.
time,
And so
yeah.
you can start to just think about like, what do I need? And again, to tap into your
Mm,
hunger, tap into what it's going to take to not be hungry anymore. If you don't want a lot of leftovers. I know Rod and I, when we go out, we will often share a meal. And a lot of places will split it for you. You don't even have to,
mhm.
sometimes they'll just bring you a second plate, but sometimes they'll actually plate it for you. And we were out with friends last night and it was funny. And it was, and again, we're all older now. And so they were eating, they were sharing. They had ordered a burger and they shared it, and they brought a second plate and they cut the burger in half. And so there are lots of things you can do to manage the situation, right? And to take charge of it and not just be at the mercy of the situation.
Do you ever, if they're bringing bread or chips and salsa, do you ever like not accept it and say no? Because that's one of the
It's a good strat.
suggestions.
Yeah, it's one of the suggestions is that, like if like especially if it's going to be if you're hungry and you're apt to get into the bread, and it's going to be a problem for you to get it out of arm's reach or ask them to take it away. And I think those strategies both work. I don't typically do it. Rod likes to get into
Yeah.
the bread, so
Or
I'll probably get my
maybe they could bring it with the meal
and the
instead
chips
of
here. I mean, we're in
before.
Mexico. We're
Mm,
in Mexico for these weeks right now, and I mean chips and salsa are everywhere,
mm.
it seems. And that can be a challenge for me. The good news down here is sometimes the sauce is too hot. So it keeps my consumption down. And sometimes it can be just it becomes so routine that it's less attractive, and just like,
Mm, mhm.
uh, we'll skip that. But so I think it can be a good strategy if you know it's going to be a problem just to say, please don't bring it or please take it away. Again, you have to think about what you need to do to take care of yourself and to help yourself and to support yourself in in reaching your goals, and whatever you need to do to support, yourself, I think is worth it. Some people, if they're eating alone, I know they'll ask for their takeout container when the meal comes,
Mhm.
because 'cause you'll say, "Well, I'm only gonna eat half," right? But then you start a little more, and so sometimes just boxing it up and taking it right off the plate and putting it aside can be helpful as another strategy. Lots of things you can do just when you start to just think about
Mhm.
how you can, support yourself. Thinking ahead can be helpful, um, for sure. Did you get into reading too the other, I mean, topic that the other big topic in this was how our thoughts and beliefs about food can affect our taste buds? And again, this gets into the whole mind body connection that I find fascinating. Did you get to the point where they talked about the fact that, I mean, what we think, what we believe, what we're sort of pre-programmed to believe the food is going to be has a very powerful effect on it. And they did blindfold experiments where they fed people, I think it was, I don't know if it was ice cream or pudding or something, and they told them it was strawberry, but it was really chocolate, and they were blindfolded, and most people believed what they were told. So our taste buds, I guess, aren't as accurate, or they can be really influenced by what we think we're going to taste, which I found really interesting. They did another one around Jello, where, and I think this was a situation I guess somebody shared where, um, I don't know, I think it was a military situation where on a ship or something, and suddenly the cherry Jello had been used up and they only had lemon left, and people started complaining about the lemon Jello, so the cook added red food coloring to the lemon Jello and made it look like cherry, and nobody complained. So, although it was still lemon flavored, the red, you saw red, you thought you were going to taste something red, and people actually did. So, I mean, the whole power of what you're thinking as it relates to your taste buds, I find fascinating too.
Mm.
All right. Anything else from this chapter? I think those were the highlights. What do you?
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick look through. I'm trying to refresh. Sorry, the chapters kind of blur together for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people aren't asked to, review based chapter by chapter. But so those were the major concepts, was just our
Oh,
habits.
eating when you're at home, eating like while being distracted, or
Oh, yeah. How
if
could
you're
we forget
if you're
that?
watching TV or working on the computer. I know I'm extremely guilty of eating while sitting at my computer,
That's a
and
really, really important one. I'm so glad that you scanned the notes because that would be something we would not want to overlook. The whole eating, yeah, there's some things we shouldn't do. We shouldn't multitask around if we're trying, especially if we're trying to be more mindful of what we're
but
eating, if we're trying to lose weight. Eating while doing something else is a recipe for disaster. And I mean, there's so many experiments in this book and in other studies that have confirmed that fact. Yeah. So, oh my, then some of the numbers were staggering, right? Like how much more
mhm.
food you eat when you eat, like while watching television or while driving, while working at your desk and checking your email. It and if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because eating is a sensory experience, right? And so if you're not paying attention to the smells, to the taste, to the chewing, to the swallowing, it's not surprising that it somehow just doesn't register the same way in your mind and in your body. And so if there's one thing that you wanted to really take seriously uh, from this, it would be stop multitasking, right? Sit down at the table, put your food on in a dish, and just pay attention. And we're not saying you have to eat like sure, eat as slowly as you can. Be mindful, taste it, enjoy it. Really enjoy your food, and that can have a huge. I've been playing more and more with this one, just really trying to slow it down, tune in, and really enjoy the food. And it does. I mean, I'm sometimes shocked at just how little I need to feel like satisfied when you're really tuning in to it. And I think that's sometimes when we're so rushed and so distracted and we're eating on the run, that's just another recipe for overeating. Yeah.
Well, he talks about like after a spoonful or two of dessert, you sort of lose like I don't know if it's the law of diminishing returns or whatnot,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, if you
you sort of have reached that peak satisfaction from a flavor standpoint.
right. And you have to think about why, like, for especially with sweet treats, why you're indulging in them, right? You're indulging in them for the pleasure of it. They're really not bringing a lot of nutritional value, right, to your body. You're doing it for the joy and for the taste. And so to not tune in seems like doing yourself a huge disservice, right? And so if you really tune in, that first bite is going to be the most delicious. And so when you
Mm-hmm.
really tune in and two or three bites, that's another thing that I take away from the French ladies don't get fat teaching. And if you really tune into it, yeah, three bites is really enough in terms of the pleasure because it's not going to be as satisfying in those later tastes and bites for sure. So that can be very, very helpful to just to tune in um, and to enjoy completely and to say enough. And again, if you're letting go of the diet mentality, even if you still tasted good, you could say, well, I'll have three more bites tomorrow, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
which is so helpful. Where if you're in that diet mindset and you're saying, well, I can never have this again, that works against you because it makes it all the more you're all the more tempted to overeat instead of just saying, well, tomorrow's another day and I'll just spread it out and enjoy it and it'll get with the more pleasure, right? Because now that's going to be the first bite and it's going to taste wonderful again. So, absolutely.
Good. This has been very helpful.
All right. Well, we'll be back in our next session, moving on to chapter 6 and 7 of the book. And if you have experiences that you would like to share with us around reading this book or some of the concepts we're sharing, please share them in the comments. If you're enjoying what we're doing here with these podcasts, please like, please subscribe, please tell others about what we're doing here. And we'll be back soon. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Have a great day. Bye bye.